Hey everybody, Bloodborne Tano here, the internet's biggest Charles. Hope you're doing well. If you didn't know, Return to Yharnam's going on right now, and it just started, so if you have a PlayStation, you should really get out there. In honor of that, as well as Bloodborne's 10th anniversary, I'm going to be using Bloodborne footage today, and you can expect more Bloodborne content from my time in Return to Yharnam over the upcoming weeks. So yeah, today I have a video dedicated to something I've been mulling over for a while now, and I want to talk about the different methodologies behind build making, specifically in the Souls games, as well as the varied outlooks and attitudes towards those methods. And ultimately, I'd like to illustrate what I find to be the most enjoyable and effective approach to buildcraft. This video is mostly geared towards PvP builds, specifically invasion builds. However, the theoretical elements of the video will be broadly applicable to any part of almost any game with build crafting. So even if invasions aren't really your thing, feel free to stick around for the discussion. So let's start off by establishing two polar extreme examples that will define the breadth of the spectrum of build methodology as I'll be discussing it. And as we go deeper, I'll start to fill in the middle of the spectrum, piece by piece. On the most casual and unoptimized side of things, we have essentially no methodology whatsoever. This end of the spectrum is essentially reserved for people on a first blind playthrough who are still learning about the attributes, scaling, diminishing returns, and the like, and just stumbling their way through the game trial and error style. Think like Elon Musk's dumpster fire of a build. While these quote-unquote builds do indeed tend to have some charm and character, for our purposes today, there's very little to say about them, so we're going to move on to the other end of the spectrum, where we find meta builds. The hyper-optimized stat spreads, the best-in-slot gear, ultra-min-maxed sweaty methodology, the most effective tactics available. For the Elden Ring guys out here, think Solitude armor with the lion head and a clean rot rapier or something of the like. You know, DS3 guys, it's probably Lapse armor and Murky hand scythe or Pontiff Knight curved sword. DS2 ice rapier. DS1 Havelmom with a crystal great club and a hornet ring. I don't know about Demon Souls. You get what I'm saying though. Saw spear for Bloodborne, that sort of thing. Meta builds. And before I get any deeper into my thesis, just a quick reminder, like and subscribe if you're enjoying what you're seeing and hearing. Every single one of you that does so really makes a big difference for me, so thank you all so much. Now, there tends to be a pretty tangible divide regarding builds between those on the more casual end of the spectrum and those who prefer to try a little harder. And I'm here to make the case that it doesn't really have to be that way. This friction is not necessary. There are folks out there that love playing fashion builds and other forms of unoptimized stuff that just feels cool to them. And there are plenty of folks that genuinely enjoy digging into the nitty-gritty numbers and exercising every bit of granular control over their build that they possibly can. And I'm here to say neither of these approaches are wrong, but I think the best approach is one that takes the best elements of both of these worlds. Allow me to use an analogy here to drive this point in a bit. As I've mentioned previously, I'm a musician, and there's a similar cultural divide between quote-unquote self-taught, sort of free-form artists and the supposedly stuffy, rigid, academically trained types. I'd compare the free-form experimental guys in the music world to the guys that want to play wacky builds with a lot going on and use unusual setups and strategies. It's fun, it keeps things fresh and makes things a hell of a lot more interesting. But one thing I've learned over my years as a musician is that you kind of have to know the rules to know when to break them. And this is equally true of making builds. Sure, it's great to find things inspiring and try to pull unlikely and novel combinations of elements out of thin air, but if you have no idea what you're doing, your song is going to be unlistenable and your build is going to be unplayable. And when you find yourself in this situation, if you approach it from the wrong angle, you risk wrapping yourself up in an echo chamber with other individuals who've had similar experiences and have been equally unable to break free of their own mental constraints. You end up thinking that music lessons will somehow make you less creative, or that playing with some meta stuff will somehow transform you from an innocent, fun-loving, laid-back gamer to the second coming of G9 himself. And let me give it to you straight, Tex. It just don't work that way. Gaining an understanding of the things that are universally effective will only enhance your ability to creatively work around the limitations of the less ideal things that you're interested in experimenting with. And there's nothing morally superior about being uninformed and ignorant and doing everything in horribly inefficient ways. If that's how you want to play, then Godspeed to you and God bless. But you have no room to complain about people using better setups, more efficient stat spreads, and the like, because the only difference is that that's how they want to play, and they've taken the time to figure out how to make it work for them. Now, don't get it twisted. This is a two-way street. And I think it's equally valuable for those of us that are more inclined to stay in the sweet embrace of a highly optimized build to step out of that comfort zone here and there with the intention of learning more about the game and improving our fundamentals, as well as indulging our creativity. Again, I'm not telling anybody what to do, but I can only imagine poking a guy to death with a spear talisman clean rot poise monster setup has to get stale eventually, and when you want to spice things up, you gotta use some seasoning. That seasoning can come in a lot of forms, and almost all of them are suboptimal. Probably the most nutritionally optimized and efficient meal out there is chicken, rice, and broccoli. No seasoning required. That's basically the meta build of eating dinner. And it's great. It'll get the job done, but sometimes you want to enrich your life a little further and have some fun, taste something exciting. Sometimes efficiency shouldn't be the end-all be-all. So the way I approach finding my happy medium in buildcraft is by taking a theme or a vibe for my character, maybe a lore backdrop or something, or just something as simple as status effects, madness, frost, or gear that looks a certain way, stuff based around moonlight, holy, etc. Maybe they're just a knight, a straight up knight, whatever, doesn't really matter. You pick a theme, and you pick a few central pieces that fit that theme, whether they're gonna be your weapons, spells, rings, armor, whatever. You pick the thing you want to center your build around, and you craft the stats to support using those things in an optimal way, even if those things themselves aren't best in slot. That doesn't mean you shouldn't optimize your stats for them. Then, you're going to want to fill in the weak spots of those main course type items with universally useful tools that can give your build a bit of versatility when the going gets tough. And I usually make sure to decide on a playstyle or two that I'm going to lean heavily into, that I'm comfortable with, and that I think aligns with the vibe of the character. And of course, the fashion has to fit whatever the theme is. I try and pick the numerically best options that still look good and fit the vibe. I'll often pick a helm or chest piece that I think is unique or cool and kind of defines the character's identity, and then I fill in the arms and legs with whatever looks good and is statistically as effective as possible. And voila! With enough trial, error, and experience with optimization, you can make even the most janky fashion build pretty reasonably effective, and that's satisfying. I know I've been pretty vague, but this is less so a tutorial and more so a PSA, that there's no one right way to make a build, and the best approach to most crafts is a holistic one that appreciates both form and function, as well as an encouragement to everybody in the community to step outside your comfort zone and push your builds to the next level. Whether that means taking the time to examine your attribute and gear choices a bit more rigorously, or taking the time to spice up the cookie cutter meta build you've been running with a bit more style and personal flair. We all gotta keep in mind, however we choose to play isn't any type of moral indicator about who we are, and there's always something you can learn from the guy on the other end of the spectrum from you. And when we think this way, that's when we can have the most fun and the most engaging experiences together. Well, that's pretty much all for today. Thanks for watching, y'all. Let me know your favorite build from any of these games in the comments. And I hope I see you out there in Yarnum. Peace.